Star Wars. So whether you love it or you hate it, or maybe you're not a fan, there's a very good chance that you've heard of it. Never mind the fact that this multimedia franchise has grossed over $10 billion in its films alone, this epic space saga created by George Lucas has created such a cultural impact that people have gone and created religions based off the various heroes and villains, and evolved and adopted the philosophies of this series as their own. I'm gonna have to be honest with you, I have never seen a Wikipedia page for something be so large that even the basic contents and tables refuse to work properly. And with 11 films and counting, an animated series, short films, several television series, role-playing games, toys, crossovers, and even radio programs, it shouldn't be surprising that Star Wars got its own MMORPG. Thus, today, we're going to be talking about Star Wars: The Old Republic. SWTOR was developed by BioWare and announced on October the 21st of 2008. The game released on December 20th, 2011, and is rumored to be one of the most expensive games that had been made at the time. The game had 1 million subscribers just 3 days after launching, easily making it one of the fastest growing MMOs ever. Even though the game has lost many subscribers over the years, it still remains quite profitable. While originally the game required a subscription to play, it did eventually become a strange hybrid, with the game being free to play as of the late 2012 era, 2013 era, but offering unique perks to those that wanted to pay a subscription still. But is it really good? I played this game a long time ago, we're talking as early as 2013, and from what I remembered back then, it was a fairly straightforward MMO. But I wouldn't say that it was anything to write home about. The game looked polished enough, but the graphics were not always my favorite. I thought the character creator was lacking, but I liked that you could choose to be a hero, villain, or just somewhere in between. The game has plenty of content, being updated with new expansions, new classes, and even new races, and it sports all types of ways to play, from PvE to PvP. But despite all the good points, I never did get too far. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't really think it's the fault of the game itself. I blamed my system back in the day, as it did become really hard to run the game itself, and when you can't really enjoy playing something above a certain FPS, well, it just sort of fades into obscurity. Now here I am 10 years later on my gaming PC and trying it again, and the game's pretty good. I won't say that the character creator has really improved, sadly. I think a vast majority of the created characters are actually ugly, but the game itself, like I said before, it actually looks really polished. The camera is way too loose from the start, and even though I don't get motion sickness, it really made me dizzy a few times until I got used to it. The HUD is atrocious though, but the skills and the menus are really straightforward, as I said before. I really love the RPG aspect of the game. The fact that there are dialogue choices that actually have an effect on the game is, in some manner, you can gain reputation and lose it, and that's not something that we see a lot in MMOs. It reminds me a lot of Mass Effect, and I found it charming because of that. Since I last played, it was obvious just how much they added, with daily login bonuses, a wardrobe system, even adding new classes. It has a tutorial system very much like Ion, with little question mark bubbles popping up occasionally. But if you've ever played an MMO before, the game's pretty easy to pick up. Spoken dialogue is actually really good in this game, and from what I've read, this game actually made it in the Guinness Book of World Records for most recorded dialogue in an MMORPG. I appreciate that our character has spoken lines as well, which is something, again, that you don't really see very often. Silent protagonists are kind of overrated at times, so this was refreshing and definitely just something different. The storyline for the Sith seems rather intriguing though. It can also be very frustrating as well, since it compels you to think, but then it really felt like you were limited on your choices that you were able to make, and it felt like you were always failing in some way. And, I want to throw in a Star Wars joke that this would drive anyone to the dark side, but I really don't think it would land, so there was an intention there. It just didn't really work out, guys. There is a deep lore and story here, though, and I remember back in the day I played both the hero, which is the Jedi, the hero quote-unquote, and I did play as a Sith character as well, and both of them have unique storylines, and again, You can tell that the lore goes pretty hard. And without going into a lot of detail, I think a lot of care was obviously taken into this plot, which I think fans of Star Wars, and heck, even just gamers that like a good story, I feel they can really appreciate it. The characters are memorable, but the MMO formula is just kind of typical. Familiar is how I might describe the game. Polished, but familiar. And I think that's a good thing. I did download the game via Steam, whereas before, again, back in the day, I just downloaded and played it via the game's website. I guess the Steam version does seem to be a bit clunky, and it did take me a minute to get the game to work. A few times when I tried starting the game, I found myself stuck on a green screen, and then the game just did not want to load at all. At one point, somehow Steam got so messed up that it actually messed with my computer settings, and I had to reset my screen size, I had to reset the icons on my desktop, and I don't know if it was some strange coincidence or something to do with how the files are organized, but this just kind of seemed to be what was going on right as I downloaded the game. And from the negative reactions that I saw on Steam, a lot of people did have an issue getting this to work. So, I don't know, like I said, it could have just been one of those strange coincidences, but it seems like downloading this game did mess with a lot of things on my computer, and I did have to mess with my settings in order to get it to work. But once I actually finally got it to run, it ran pretty smooth. So I would just say it's a buggy mess to get the game to launch, but once you do get it launched and working, then it runs just fine, so long as you have the power in your computer or laptop in order to play it at a decent frame rate. So what can actually be said about the community then? Because for some people, MMOs, obviously the community aspect is really important, and it's no fun playing a dead MMO or, an MMO where you're not able to team up with people or find people if that's really what you want to do. As far as the community goes, the community actually seems pretty active. Even as far back as 2021, I had friends telling me that they had gone back to the game and were loving all the new content. Hopping in for the first time the other day, I actually saw several new players, and the general chat was actually pretty active, and I don't think many of what I saw were actual bots. Online, it states that there's still at least 1 million active players monthly, which makes this community absolutely huge. And I've seen several active forums and guilds for role players and people looking for PvP and more. The game overall still receives mostly popular reviews, receiving an 85 out of 100 from Metacritic and a 9 out of 10 from IGN. It even got the Best MMO of 2011 award, which I think is pretty darn good, since maybe it's something that not everybody would play. As far as if the game is something that you can solo, I remember hearing that to a point you could play solo, but then it did kind of depend on you teaming up in groups. I'm really not sure if this is still the case, and I haven't really played enough to actually test this out for myself. It could be that the game actually does have a bigger focus on teaming up with other people, but for right now, I'm just enjoying a single player experience, and there doesn't seem a lot of pressure to actually team up with others. So, if you want a solo experience and a good story, this might still be it, but I'd say just do a little bit more research and see how heavily it forces you to play with other people later. I do know that I didn't get too far back in the day, but I think I did reach a point where things were starting to get complicated. There are some modes of play that do tend to confuse people, and I think that's more concerning the Starship. Because again, there are multiple ways to play in this game, but there's also multiple modes of gameplay. And not like multiple modes of gameplay, but more like multiple things that you have to do in-game. And it's not just about the MMO aspect. And I guess the Starship is one of those that one of my friends complained about, saying that the controls were just a little odd and maybe they didn't understand it so much. Again, I haven't really gotten to that point myself. I also know that there tends to be a bit of a discrepancy with the game being a little pay to win. Because there is a subscription mode, naturally people that are paying money are going to have an advantage. I noticed this with the outfit system. So in normal MMOs, there's usually a setting that allows you to play in a way that you can kind of hide your helmet, because helmets do tend to be a little bit ugly, and some people don't like their characters running around with helmets on, and it really just is an aesthetic sort of thing. Star Wars is weird in that they do actually kind of keep that setting hidden behind a paywall, and I can't say that I agree. So while the game itself is free to play, and it offers a lot of stuff right off the bat for people that are playing free, the fact that even just hiding your helmet is behind a paywall I think is kind of silly considering how old the game is. But again, it could be worse. At least we're not seeing like gacha mechanics or anything else, but there's clearly some pay to win stuff in there, and I have heard complaints about people saying that the people paying subscriptions have an unfair advantage, but since it was a game that originally had a subscription, I don't really feel any negative sort of feelings for those that do continue to pay for a subscription, especially if it's a game that they like. And again, you're kind of choosing to play, something that has a pay-to-win system at that point. So if it's not really for you, and if you are one of those people that feel like pay-to-win or people paying for a subscription would have an unfair advantage, then maybe this is just a game better skipped. But again, that's just kind of my opinion on that. I would say that overall, though, that this is a great MMO, and it's probably one of the best free MMOs you could possibly play. Now, I'm not the biggest Star Wars nerd. I've been to conventions, I've seen how many clone troopers there are, I've seen the people dressed as Jedi and the Sith and everything in between. I have friends that gush over Baby Yoda and The Mandalorian, but I'm just kind of not there. I mean, I know the basics, which means that, I kind of get the story, but I kind of don't get the story. So I'm not going to go into detail about whether it's lore accurate or if it goes against the lore. I'm not really the person to talk to about that. So if you come into the comments and tell me like, hey, the story really sucks because of A, B, C, D, E, I wouldn't know what to say to that, because again, I'm just taking the story as it is and I have really nothing else to apply it to. I mean, I've seen the first 6 movies, and then after that you kind of lost me. So if you're one of those absolute lore junkies when it comes to Star Wars, you can tell me if it's good or not if you've played the game. I'm just gonna have to take your word for it. But so again, I'm not the biggest Star Wars nerd, but I really appreciate what this game actually brings to the table. Not to mention the fact that the sci-fi setting makes it stand out from the typical fantasy-like themes of other MMORPGs. Dragons and castles are cool, high magic's awesome, but I feel like we don't really have a lot of sci-fi sort of settings when it comes to MMOs, and so, this game, even though it's based off of a huge franchise, it's still pretty refreshing, and the fact that it is based off of something so huge, but was done so well, again, I think that's very refreshing, and I think it's very rare to see. The game does have its hiccups, but like I said, it usually plays just fine, and it's pretty easy to get into. The story's there for those that want it, and it has a little bit of everything for any kind of gamer, mostly, So would I recommend it as a game to play? I mean, absolutely, and I myself will probably continue to play it for some time. Don't know if I'll post it on here, of course, but, I have enjoyed playing it on my off time, just kind of picking it up for maybe 17-20 minutes and setting it down. So not definitely getting into it hardcore or anything, but it's a nice time waster. But anyways, what do you think? Have you tried this MMORPG before, and what side did you pick? I mean, me, I'm always for the baddies, okay? Sith, Horde, whatever, that's me. But what side did you pick, and why did you pick that side? As always, feel free to leave your thoughts and your opinions in the comment section down below. If you like this video and want to see more, go ahead and hit that like button and feel free to subscribe. If you have an MMORPG that you'd like me to try for the MMO sampler, go ahead and let me know down in the comment section, and I might just check it out if it seems like it's something that's interesting. Anyways, thank you all for your continued support, and I, of course, will see you all in the next video. Ciao, you guys.